The World War I Memorial Chime and Clock Tower was designed in 1920 as a memorial to those 34 men who died in World War I. So if you look up here, you're going to see originally the blueprint of the tower was very daunting. And in fact, when the Memorial Committee designed something so big and so grand, they said, we want something different. We don't want a giant brick chapel that was proposed or a giant flagpole. We want something that was incredibly nuts and absolutely crazy. A giant carillon tower. A carillon is a set of 23 or more bells cast together in tune so that they play much like a piano, except it's a building. Go on. Vance Sykes, who was a member of one of our early classes, wrote a letter to the president of the Alumni Association to say, we need to do something about these men who died in the Great War. They didn't see the second one coming, so they called it the Great War.
When he steps back again, just go shove it in front of him before he trips over it.
This is our connection to State College, Iowa. They went to State College, Iowa in Ames, and they said, we really do like very much their chime tower. So we essentially borrowed their proportions. Do you see any similarities?
No.
No.
Ours is original.
Yeah. So the openings at the top, the proportions, and in fact the footprint of the large middle section of the tower is the exact same. So we very much liked how we observed how the students interacted on that campus, and we liked what happened around the campus. People would gather for concerts. It would foster tradition. There are lots of things that intersected here between alumni, college students, and the community. Everyone enjoyed this sucker. It was awesome. Okay. The cornerstone of the tower, this Masonic stamp, is actually on the northeast corner, much like all the other cornerstones we have on this campus, almost all of which you can see from this point. It was laid in 1921. The Alumni News was our alumni newsletter written by E.B. Owen, again, another name you know, who was the editor of the magazine and our college registrar. This was his way to get everyone on the same page who was in the war. How do we keep up with our men? This was his way. He chronicled the construction of the tower. The tower, you see right now, looks much like a mausoleum in a cemetery, more so than an actual giant imposing clock tower edifice. And in fact, if you think about it, is the tombstone of 34 men who died. It grows up out of the ground as they finish the first section of the tower. This thing out of the next height. Probably because we're looking at granite. Okay. 1922. We get to 1924. These are the early years. We get to 1926. The tower becomes a teenager. It's growing up quite well. Each several years, we're only able to fund about 10 feet. The college at this point becomes broke. We see a whole lot of problems happening. The onset of the Great Depression happens, and we begin to lose our shit. We can't afford anything. We can't afford classes. We can't afford buildings. We can't afford to build bathrooms at this point. One thing saved our ass. This was the federal government. Hold on, wait. Let's bask in that for a minute. What? An economic stimulus package sent out by FDR decided we need to make jobs. And we're going to make jobs by the Works Progress Administration. The WPA founded several things on this campus. The Free Expression Tunnel, Nelson Hall, the Raleigh Little Theater across Hillsborough Street where the Rose Garden is, and the upper part of this tower, everything above that first demarcation line. So from 1926 until 1937, the tower sat unfinished in its structure. It was halfway done, just like the Washington Monument. But, as you'll see here, the tower began to grow. The federal government did in 9 months what we could not do in 20 years. Now the tower, the responsibility of the government was much of that of the actual building itself. Think about it this way. The government's not responsible for how you finish your railings or bring in your couches. That's your responsibility. And that's what they said. We're going to build a tower and then peace, we're out. So the tower continues to get built. This is actual footage of Leonidas Polk's grandson. He had this. Leonidas Polk's grandson had this and found me and gave it to me, of the tower getting reconstructed in June of 1937. So they lifted the blocks up. There was a giant gantry crane erected in the center of the tower, and they would literally hoist up blocks and lay them in place. The bottom of the blocks had a female connection. They sat on top of a male connection, and they pushed it in the mortar, and that's how the stones were all connected together. A bunch of stacked blocks. They had to disassemble the crane.
Oh.
Yeah. Once it got that tall, they disassembled it. You can barely see it here because this slide is actually the color of what it's projected on. But at the top there, the scaffolding was all the way at the top. There are no numerals on the clock face yet because this was 1938. The seniors of that class, actually next, decided to go ahead and donate $1,000 for the clock. As we got at that point, though, the plans for the clock had changed. Next. Originally, this was from the Seth Thomas Clock Company. This is what they wanted. This is what we had decided. Giant cogwheels, a big pendulum that would swing back and forth. Think of all the picturesque things you've ever thought of how a clock feels and works, and put that up there. See these glass clock faces. Think of Big Ben in London. Big Ben is actually the bell housed in a tower of Big Ben. Big Ben is the bell. And lit from the back at night. And also, during the day, don't go back. During the day, it would let light into the chamber behind the clock, so someone could play the bell. This is the original clock face designed for this tower. It was meant to be glass, just like that. But when we got up there, all we had was a shitload of rock, so we said, let's just put it in. That's what she said. So you see, it looks very much similar to what it was supposed to be. But that's all we had when we got to that point. 10 years after that, we had the door finished and a lower room inside the tower. And it was dedicated on Armistice Day in November of 1949. So we had started the project in December of 1921 and finished it, the building per se, in 1949. That's how long it took us to build our memorial tower. Now, as we keep going, you'll see here, this is a picture of the tablet that's inside the tower. The tablet has several names on it, the first of which is of a man named James Henry Bowen. Was from Little Washington, North Carolina, the first Washington. Predates Washington, D.C. On the coast of North Carolina, a town called Washington. He was a very famous person. He still is to this day from there. He was 16 years old when he came to State College, North Carolina. He was enrolled here as a freshman. And in his first year, left to go join the Lafayette Escadrille, alternative Lafayette Flying Corps, right before the war started. He joined the French before we even declared war. He wanted to fly. He wanted to do some spectacular things. And was the best flying student his flying school had ever seen. He was flying loop-de-loops in planes meant to bomb shit. He was really good at what he did. But he met his fate after shooting down some German planes. His plane crashed. He was recovered from the site but died shortly thereafter. You also have Corporal John Wesley Griffith Jr., who, as he got on a boat to go to France, contracted double pneumonia from the Spanish influenza, got off the boat after he disembarked in France, and died in the hospital 2 days later. George Linwood Jeffers was the man who lived, to borrow from a very famous book. He was the one man that came to State College, went to World War I, but came back. He was misreported missing in action. He actually came back from the war, and he was like, that's my name. So, strangely enough, the night before the dedication ceremony, they had someone from the metal shop come over and knock an O and an N into his last name, and change it from George L. Jeffers to George E. Jefferson. So when you go into the tower room and you look closely, you'll see a crude-looking O and an N that don't match the others. That was what we had to do because we had spent 10 years worth of money to buy this tablet. We could not afford it again. So they came out with a chisel and made it right. What we had to do. Here is Owen Morrow Sigmund. We learned about him at the 1911 building. President of the class of 1911. He was struck down by a locomotive in France as he was serving his country. Well known, he did not deserve the respect of his peers, but earned it. He never sought it out. And if you read his Agremec entry, he was quite the bass. He was a very good singer. And his church in Corinth still has a plaque over their choir with his name on it, where he used to stand. And finally, Frank Martin Thompson, was a very well-known athlete, which we talked about earlier. He was softball and a baseball, football player. Eventually became their coach. And after he died, Vance Sykes says, we got to do something about Frank Thompson. So they named our new gym after him. Now it's our theater. Interesting.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! Yay, go theater. So let's get back to this cool picture of NC State. There's the tower, upper left. The front center of the picture is Maiden Lane, which is the road directly behind the tower, between the wing zone and the bell tower, Mart. That's exciting. On it you see several houses, most of which were all the professorship and the president of the college lived. It was a very regal community and the very first subdivision outside of downtown. It was a very important place because it was connected directly to the college. You see on the upper part of the frame the old Riddick Stadium. You see it up there? That's where Wolfpack Sports were. Awesome. Pullen Hall is a big building there, almost in the center. And Hillsborough Street going from left to right. This is the inside of the tower right now. The federal government left it empty because, remember, we had to do everything inside. They built the building, peace, we're out. This is what's inside right now. No stairs, no bells. We never finished this tower. Whoopsie daisy. So I went looking. You can probably barely see it. There it is. No, you can't. Well, it's a line drawing. It shows you the difference between what we got and what we should have got. And what we're missing, stairs, a chamber at the top, and bells. These were designed in the original blueprint. I went looking for these bells. I went looking for these stairs. Where were they? I came across in archives a single word inside of the folder, bell, and inside this folder, a single word on a piece of paper referencing the word Charlotte. Who is Charlotte? I went looking for Charlotte. Charlotte, looking for wives of the member committee who built the tower, all the famous people on campus, their wives, daughters, anyone. Charlotte. I never found anything about Charlotte, but I learned that Charlotte was an interesting person. Next. Charlotte not only was a ship, but she was a very famous ship. The USS Charlotte.
I showed you guys the other night. That's the fake bell.
The USS Charlotte was a very handsome ship. She was a battle cruiser. She was a cruiser. The USS Charlotte was commissioned the same year the RMS Titanic was ordered. Had a crew of almost 1,000 men, and she was a floating city. And I had also found my bell right there in the middle, hanging on the bridge of the ship. This bell, what happened to this bell? Well, as you'll see, Colonel Harrelson, for Harrelson Hall, his name was our president for almost 20 years here in NC State, was a famous Freemason, and very much held his country at the top of the list. Country, family, college, they're all up there together. But he commissioned for the bell in 1938. So I went looking for this bell, and I came up absolutely empty-handed. Didn't find it. I knew it was here, and I knew someday I would find it. So we come up to another picture here. Go ahead. I know, there's one more frame. There it is. I am up here snooping around on the top of the old chemistry building, Withers Hall, which is... This is Daniels, and that is Withers. This is Riddick. This is Burlington right here, the nuclear building. The first nuclear reactor built for peaceful purposes on a college campus. I was wondering, why did they put it there and destroy that quad? So I was studying this quad for urban design purposes when I was on the roof of Withers, and I came across something interesting on top of Withers in a little cage. What's that? Why is this here? And look on the left-hand side right here. Look how close we are. We are almost there. In fact, we're 1,233 feet away from the top of the bell tower. This was my bell. I have found the bell to the USS Charlotte. Why is it on top of our old chemistry building? I went up to take pictures. Wait, this does not say USS Charlotte. This is something completely different. The Charlotte was commissioned in 1902. This is 1870. I was really baffled at this point. Metropolitan. There wasn't a damn thing metropolitan about Raleigh. So I went digging around even more. Turns out, this building used to be in downtown Raleigh. It's called Metropolitan Hall. Met Hall. Met Hall was our first city hall, designed, built from Baltimore architects, just like the bell, in 1870. And in 1914, it was torn down to make way for a newer building. In 1914, remember City Market in downtown Raleigh, where the Moore Square is? That burst out of the fact that this died. The City Market was in this building originally. The mayor's office, our opera house for downtown Raleigh, the fire department, and jail, all in one quaint little building all together with the City Market. Want to buy a cantaloupe, find a convicted felon, and hear the opera all in one place. Our friendly little bell was up at the top of that little thing. A cupola, for all of you, I keep saying that stupid word. It's a little perch on top of a roof that contains something, usually a clock and or a bell. There are many cupolas on this campus. The one I can think of mostly is the one on top of Berry Hall. But this building was torn down in...
Does that contain either of those items?
No, it does not, which is funny. The original cupola on Berry Hall got blown off by Hurricane Hazel in the 50s, and they rebuilt it like 6 years ago from the original plan, which is kind of cool. So we're trying to find out where this bell is going, and we discover that the picture on the right is Fire Station number 1, the central station near the Capitol building in downtown Raleigh. Since the fire department owned the bell, it would basically, since the city of Raleigh was designed as a copy of Philadelphia, the bell would ring once, twice, thrice, or 4 times, depending on what quadrant of the city the fire was in. Each park square had an identity. Moore Square, Nash Square, Burke Square, and Caswell Square, each one denoting where the fire was. So the fire department could pop out the back of the building and attend to the fire. Well, they borrowed the bell, they kept it as they moved buildings. Their second building came down. The bell used to hang in this tower. And as it came down, this photo was snapped on the left as the firefighters lament their fallen bell. It didn't actually fall, but it was just sitting chilling on the ground. And I used this picture to match up with the one on Withers Hall, and come to find out they're an absolute match. This was the bell from Metropolitan Hall. It actually had come from there. There were several marks on it. This article dates from January 23rd, 2008. I can't read the stone there. But yeah, that's when this project started, when I started getting nosy and looking around campus for all these artifacts that were supposedly missing. Well, I had to find out, well, let's just finish the deed. Let's put the bitch in the tower where it belongs. It fit in the door by 1/4 of an inch. I can't plan this. It would go in and up into the tower. So things were working out well until we actually listened to it. This is me with a hammer. Didn't sound that good, and in fact would not have worked well with the electronic chimes that were up in the tower now. You see, when the tower was unable to be finished originally in 1949, the president of the class of 1941 commissioned an electronic set of bells to be put in place until we could pay for real bells. The president's name was Bill Friday.
We paid good money for it.
God rest his soul. Jay and I spoke with Bill Friday about this project in 2009. We got the whole thing on tape. Very cool story. That's a whole nother different chapter of this whole bell tower project, but if you wanted more, let me know. So we started finding out more about this bell. We said, well, it doesn't sound good. Then we realized, oh right, it was meant to make a loud noise, not a pretty noise. So we gave it back to the fire department. We said, come and get it. You can have it. It's your history. Take it. So they took it off the building, and there we are, taking off the building. And so now, I'm still looking for something else. The Charlotte still had one more secret. And in fact, when Riddick Stadium was torn down, remember the eastern stands were torn down first in '68, they found a bell, and it said some weird shit on it. They sent it to Wilmington. Why did they send it to Wilmington? Because the Charlotte's real name was the USS North Carolina. The USS North Carolina had 4 different boats. This was the 3rd incarnation. Whenever they took the name off of the 3rd boat to put it on the 4th one, that's currently mooring in Wilmington Bay, they renamed it the Charlotte. And because all this shit was happening after they renamed it, I had only seen the Charlotte, and at this point had no clue that someone had found the bell under Riddick Stadium, read the fact that it said USS North Carolina on it, and sent it back to Wilmington, unknowing that we actually owned it. Craziness. So I went on to discover that Silent Bell Oasis Song of Victory, March 3rd, 1940, this bell was the closest to ever getting installed in this tower. Think about it. Colonel Harrelson's World War I bell from a World War I ship in a World War I tower. Makes perfect sense. It never quite happened. But on this date, students, after we whooped UNC's ass in a basketball game March 3rd, stormed into the tower because yet the bronze door had not been put up, broke down that little door, and rang the bell in victorious jubilation as we defeated UNC that day. The bell was on the floor in the tower. I have no knowledge of why it was never raised and hung, but it made it there, and then it was stashed under Riddick Stadium for reasons I don't know. So now, we're at the end of that whole cycle. We've given away all of our bells. Let's start from the beginning. So what happened was...
Instead of at least